Are you wondering what 1L books you're supposed to be reading before law school starts? If that's you, don't worry. I was in the same position heading into law school, and I had never heard of the 1L books before. So the 1L books generally refer to books that law school graduates have written about their 1L year. And they vary in length and content and perspective. And so it can be difficult to know which ones you should add to your reading list and which ones you can cut out. And so if that's you, stick around because I'm going to break down the most famous 1L books, give you my thoughts on the content of each, and whether I would recommend adding them to your reading list. And speaking of 1L a year, if getting really exciting 1L grades is one of your goals heading into law school, then definitely check out my Beat the Curve guide. It is a breakdown of all of the strategies that I believe every new 1L should know before law school starts so you can hit the ground running on day one of class and position yourself for those as high as I can go grade goals. I'll be sure to link the guide in the description below. And with that, guys, if you are ready to dive in, smash that like button and let's do it. Let's kick things off with arguably the most famous 1L book of all time, 1L by Scott Turow. And 1L is all about an introspective memoir that Scott Turow wrote about his first year at Harvard Law School. And I think he does a wonderful job of really painting the picture of what 1L year is like and how it feels going through it. And so he really illustrates the pain, the turmoil, the competitiveness, the fear. And he really dives into the experiences of what it's like to read a case for the first time, what it's like to be cold called on in class for the first time, what it's like to walk into a room or be in an experience of having no idea what's going on and for the first time in your life, not being the smartest person in the room, and what a hit that takes to self-confidence and self-identity. In terms of how I would summarize this book in one line, I would say that it is 1L year is a mental and emotional slog of fear, dread, overwhelm, and utter confusion. The person I would recommend this book to is anyone who is considering law school. So if you are on the fence, if you're wondering if law school is a good fit for you, I think this is a really great book to show you what that first year of law school is going to be like and really give you that insider's perspective on whether going through the first year of law school is worth it to you to come out the other side and be a lawyer. For those of you guys who are already heading into law school, I'm a little bit more conflicted about whether to recommend that you guys read this, because I think that law school requires a balance between knowing that you have the ability to get through it and the ability to do hard things and the excitement and the newness of that experience, and balancing it with the reality of how difficult it's going to be, how much work it's going to be, how much it's going to demand of you. And I'm just worried that if you guys read 1L right before law school, that it's going to tip you a little bit more in the direction of pessimism and overwhelm and anxiety. So just keep that in mind when deciding whether or not you want to actually add this to your reading list. And my favorite quote from this book, which is very famous, so you guys may have heard of it before, is the following. Try tonight to read a case for the first time. It's harder than hell. It was 9 o'clock when I started reading. The case is 4 pages long, and at 10:35, I finally finished. It was something like stirring concrete with my eyelashes. I had no idea what half the words meant. I must have opened Black Law's dictionary 25 times, and I still can't understand many of the definitions. There are notations and numbers throughout the case whose purpose baffles me. And even now, I'm not crystal clear on what the court finally decided to do. The next 1L book is Getting to Maybe, and this is an incredibly famous 1L book as well. It's written by 2 law school professors, and it's all about how to tackle a law school final exam. And as the title suggests, it's all about digging into how the answer on a law school final exam is not what's important and arguably doesn't even exist. Instead, the arguments and counter-arguments you make in your analysis towards that answer is what gets you all of your points. And so in this book, they dive really deeply into identifying all the different potential ambiguities that a law school final exam might trigger. So ambiguities in the law, ambiguities in the facts, ambiguities in policy, statutory ambiguities, case holding ambiguities, you name it. If I had to summarize this book in one line, I would say that it is, on a law school exam, always argue both sides. Now, I feel very strongly in agreement that this is something that is the big differentiator in law school final exam answers that are very strong versus ones that are not as strong. And that is that you want to make the arguments and the counter arguments for every issue that you spot. That being said, my thoughts on this book in particular are that the professors actually go way too in the weeds and naming the different ambiguities that pop up or could pop up on a law school final exam. The reason is that even though, yes, there are numerous, dozens, possibly even hundreds of different types of ambiguities that might come up on a final exam, it doesn't actually matter what the type of ambiguity is. It doesn't matter that we give it a name. What matters is that we argue both sides and that we form a counter argument to it, regardless of what the type of ambiguity is. And so even reading it as someone who has been through law school, who has practiced as a litigator, I actually found it very confusing and overwhelming because of the nomenclature they used with, again, all these different type of ambiguities. And so as an incoming 1L, I actually wouldn't recommend reading it because I think it actually creates more confusion than clarity in sort of suggesting that you have to first identify the type of ambiguity before you analyze that ambiguity, which you don't need to do. And so I think that the underlying message of the book is a really important one, but just keeping that underlying message in mind is much more powerful, in my view, than spending time reading the book itself. My favorite quote from the book is, "The key here is that genuine uncertainty about the legal result is exactly what the professor hopes to create. If that uncertainty makes you feel bad, writing down why is your best revenge." The next 1L book is One L of a Ride by Andrew McClurg, who is a law school professor and has worked at different law schools in the country over the years. And first and foremost, I love the name of it, of course, amazing name. And the book is a really good overview of what 1L year is like, what classes you can expect to take, what study strategies are involved, what extracurriculars are available, and does a really good job of also layering in the emotional component of what 1L year is like for those of us going through it. If I had to sum up the book in one line, I would say that it is, once you fall behind in law school, it is impossible to catch up. And he makes a point of this over and over throughout the book, which I think is a really good point, and just sort of underlining how much work is involved in 1L year and how important it is to stay on top of it so that you don't drown and wind up at the end of the semester completely underwater. So if you're someone who is heading into 1L year and you don't have interest in or don't have access to a 1L prep course or a 1L coach, then I think this is a really good book to take a look at because it does a good job of kind of giving you a lot of different aspects of 1L year, from the expectation piece to the strategy piece to the extracurricular piece and to the emotional piece. And I think it's also really interesting from a professor's perspective in terms of what he tends to see successful law students do versus unsuccessful law students. The things to keep in mind and be aware of as you read through the book is that it is from a professor's perspective. So there are a few things that it sounds like he is repeating because he's seen students do it, not necessarily that he's dug into it from a 1L's perspective in terms of what would be the most powerful strategy in terms of setting yourself up for the 1L grades that you want, which is fine. Like, we all have our biases and we all have our different perspectives, but things like making sure that you're incredibly prepared for class to participate in the class discussion. That's something that makes the professor's life better, but doesn't necessarily mean it's the best use of your time as a 1L student. And in fact, as you guys have probably heard in a lot of my videos, the reading is the lowest ROI, return on investment, of time invested and understanding gained. The other thing to keep in mind is that he has a few of the sort of traditional outdated study strategies like rainbow briefing your cases in the case book, which you guys have probably heard me talk about as well, is something that I don't recommend doing, and a few of the final exam taking strategies as well. But overall, I think he does a good job. I think he hits a lot of good points, and I think it's a really comprehensive book to read if you don't have access to a course or a program or a coach. And my favorite quote of the book is, "A healthy trepidation starting law school is not only a good motivator, but appropriate given what you're about to embark on. To not have some anxiety about law school doesn't make one brave, but foolish, clueless about what the person is getting into. Hey guys, this is Angela from the future, and I realized as I was editing this video that I come down pretty harshly on the 1L books. And I think the reason for that is that I'm not actually a book person. I don't read for fun, it doesn't relax me, and it's not actually my favorite way to learn. I'm much more of a person who thrives in taking action, sort of like the learning how to fish by fishing rather than learning how to fish by reading about how to fish. And the other reason that I am probably overly critical of these books is that I have been a law school strategy coach for years now, and I've tested every single one of the theories in these books or that other people have suggested from their own experience. And I've seen what works and what doesn't with students. And so I feel very strongly about some of the old school traditional strategies that no longer apply or no longer move the needle. And then also strategies that don't go deep enough and don't explain enough in order to put them into action and really be implementable for people. And so you guys may actually enjoy these books more than I'm letting on, but just keep in mind that you are hearing this from the filtered perspective and the biased perspective of somebody who is, I would say, jaded, but who's just been down the rabbit hole and has seen these different things in practice. And that's why I tend to be overly critical. The next 1L book is Law School Confidential, which is a book that I had heard of from several of my students and decided to go ahead and read or listen to on audiobooks, actually. And my first impression of the book was that it's very long. So it touches on every aspect of the law school process, from the LSAT to law school admissions to law school to bar prep to getting your first job out of law school, which in theory is really great, right? Sort of giving you a survey of all of the different points in the process and sort of presenting each one of those to the reader. The sort of downside for me was that as I was reading the book, I felt like it was very much a jack of all trades, master of none. And that it didn't feel like there was particular expertise in any one of the areas, but instead it was sort of like a smattering of different things that you could try or different things that you could do or different things that people have had lived experiences of. And so the good news is that, for example, if you are a first-generation law student and you don't know anything about law school or the process of getting into or getting out of law school, then I think it can be a helpful book if you sort of take it at face value in the sense of it being an experiential smattering of the different points along the process. If you are looking for it as an incoming 1L of really, really solid, powerful, actionable advice, it's not my favorite book out there. And if I had to sum up the book in one line, it would be do all the things and you'll be fine. And so part of the problem with having a survey type book like this is that what they touch upon and what they advise you to do is all of the things, right? So everything that any one of them had heard of or had tried or had done. And the problem with that is that time is finite and energy is finite. And it doesn't really give an actionable roadmap of what to do or what to prioritize in any one given point in time. And so even as someone who has been through the law school process, who has worked as a practicing lawyer, I felt very overwhelmed by all of the possible things I could do, which is one of the problems in law school as it is that there are way more possible things you could do than time and energy that you actually have to devote to any one of these things. So just keep that in mind if you're going to read it, is that it would be more of a here are all the possible potential things that exist out there, and not as an action plan or a roadmap or a game plan for what to actually do. The other thing to keep in mind as well is that the book is somewhat outdated in its advice. And so when it's talking about LSAT study strategies or law school admission strategies or job getting strategies, it is seeming to refer to decades old practices. And so again, just take it with a grain of salt when you're reading these things. So if there are references to fax machines, if there are references to binders and folders and things like that, if there are references to old school policies and traditions, just know that that is not the current state of how I would recommend going about any one of these things. And so just make sure that you're keeping the date in mind as you go through this as well. The next 1L book is How to Be Sort of Happy in Law School by Catherine Young. And this book reads sort of like an approachable academic article. So she writes it from the perspective of a sociologist, someone who went through law school, who got her PhD, who has also worked as a law school professor. And it is a bit of a survey type book of anecdotes from current law students and now practicing lawyers for how they lived, the lived experience of law school. And so it's really great at validating that experience. In fact, if I had to sum it up in one line, it would be, you're not alone. There's nothing wrong with you. Hating law school is totally normal. So if you're someone who is interested in law school, curious about law school, or someone who is currently in law school and you're looking for that validation of whatever experience it is that you had, whether it's from a gender perspective, a religious perspective, a class perspective, this book is really, really great about shining light on those different experiences and really letting you know how normal it is to be someone who really struggles in law school, who experiences law school as a really, really difficult phase in their life. So that's really great. It's not a strategy book in the sense of how to succeed in law school, although she does give some advice on things like mindfulness and how to exercise and what to keep in mind when you're choosing housing and things like that. But it's not going to be sort of a step-by-step game plan of how to get the grades you want or how to get the job you want, or sort of those tangible end goals. But if, again, you're looking for more of the experiential route, this could be a really great book for you to check out. So those are my takes on the 1L books, but I'm curious to hear what you guys think as well. So if you have read any of these books, let me know what you think about them in the comments section below. And if there's any book that you've heard of or that you have personally read that you'd like to get my take on or hear my review on, then let me know what the title of that is as well. And I can absolutely do a follow-up video and give you guys my thoughts on any other 1L books you might have read or heard of. And if you're someone like me who really thrives in taking action and learning how to fish by fishing rather than learning how to fish by reading how to fish, then I definitely want to invite you to join us inside my signature 1L coaching program, Law School Master Plan. And it is a step-by-step strategy program designed for incoming 1Ls who want to dive in and position themselves for the 1L grades that all their hard work deserves, so you can hit the ground running on day one of class and really take your first year of law school all the way. So I will definitely link that in the description below. And with that, guys, I hope this was helpful, and I will see you in the next video.